Welcome to the reality show, day 70 of the war in Israel. I'm joined by Linda Cordair, Morgan Carter, and we are hoping to be joined by James Valiant as well soon. We're going to be discussing a couple of interviews on British television in recent days. The second one will be something that we're going to show bits of and then discuss. It's going to be a lecturer from a university, the uh, School of African Studies in London, a university that makes other universities look not as bad as they actually are. And this guy shows why. But first of all, we have this interview with the Israeli ambassador, Tzipi Khotoveli. She's an ambassador to the UK, the ambassador to the UK. So she had this 12-minute interview on Sky with this guy who people who saw my appearance on Sky News, that's the same guy who interviewed me, made similar faces at me that he made at her. But anyway, yeah, this is something we see from the pro Hamas side in this war is if anybody who is in any way associated with Israel says anything that they think they can use as propaganda against Israel, they will do so. So she rejected the two-state solution, something that Israel officially has not done. Yeah, as an ambassador, you would think she has to basically speak the party line. That's their job. But Israel hasn't rejected the two-state solution. Netanyahu, the Likud party, officially supports the two-state solution. But she said it. She rejected that idea, and this is now headline news. You know, above any soldiers who died, any rockets that are fired. This is the main news story. Uh, yeah, over the past couple of days. Linda, your thoughts? You watched the interview. You've seen some of the reactions. What do you think?
Well, first, let me say that if I never have to see another interview that Mark Austin does again, I'll be fine. Wow. He's rude, he's pretentious, he's obnoxious, and frankly, I don't think he's fair. If you watch both interviews back to back, I think he absolutely favored the Palestinian ambassador. He interrupted him far less. Maybe it's a thing against women. I don't know, but I think he's just ridiculous and probably overpaid for what he's doing. But that being said, I respected her passion for what she was saying. The fact that this is even still happening, obviously, is atrocious. That these people think that we should just sweep everything that happened in October under the rug and move on. And that seems to be what I'm getting from the Palestinian side. But I think she's very passionate. I think she made a lot of valid points, and this needs to be over.
Yeah. By the way, I don't know if it's something against women because he was, if you watch his interview with me, although I didn't tell him how I identify, so maybe that was why. But yeah, some people are just generally assholes to the world. But we don't know the details of his personal preferences. Morgan, your thoughts?
Um, yeah, I also don't know his preferences, but I think Linda's right about the fact that he was far harsher on the Israeli ambassador than he was on Hossam Zomlot. And although he tries to do a bit of the thing that you see very frequently with broadcast journalists, where they try and kind of be hard hitting on both sides, I think there's something essentially kind of flawed about that. In that this isn't an issue where there is no moral side where you have to be kind of tough on both of them in the same way. And I think he is projecting a kind of moral neutrality where it's inappropriate. I also think that it's very telling that this was such a controversial thing. The fact that the idea of rejecting the two-state solution or saying that October 7th proves the failure of the two-state solution, the fact that people find that so controversial, I think speaks to the fact that people are in many ways essentially unserious about the threat that Israel's facing. Because of course that's what you should be concluding. And yet so much of the world is shocked by that. How so many people can still support the two-state solution when it's so devastating to Israel and when Israel pursues it at its own expense, which is something which we can say about the second interview with the SOAS professor as well, because he makes comments along the same lines. When people still support the two-state solution, given that that's the case, I think that's what's so shocking about this, really. It's not actually her comments, but there we go. But so those are my thoughts on it.
James, did you get to see the interview? Your thoughts on the interviewee?
I really didn't get a chance to see the interview, just a summary of it. And I have to say, I agree with what Morgan just said there. It's astonishing. It's the same issue we were talking about earlier on the Daily Objective. It's a question of moral clarity. A two-state solution. I mean, think about it right now. Can you imagine? I mean, talk about not realizing the threat that Hamas is, right? Talk about not realizing the threat that Hamas is. In effect, we've had a two-state solution for the last 16, 17 years, haven't we? I mean, unilaterally, Israel gave Gaza to the bad guys, and we've seen the result. We've been living, in effect, with a two-state solution. Open your eyes, folks. This is what it looks like, October 7th.
So, for me, watching this interview, I didn't like the way Tzipi Hotovely spoke. I think she's the one thing I do agree with her is that the two-state solution should be rejected. Although, again, if she's the spokesperson for the Israeli government, you can't say this is what I prefer. Your job is to say what your employer's policy is. But yeah, she was very what bothered me was how apologetic she was in the on the whole innocent civilians issue. And she said she went out of her way to say Israel not only doesn't target innocent civilians, they go, they wouldn't bomb terrorists if they knew there were innocent civilians there. And very much playing into an aspect of this war that is only useful to the anti-Israel side. And Israel, in this, she does follow her employer's policy. She is a true spokesman for the Israeli government, because Israel really does follow a policy where the death of its own people is preferable to deaths of so-called innocents in Gaza. Linda, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I obviously need to go back and watch that again, and I'll admit I was multitasking as I was listening to it. I did like the way that she fought back to him, though. I had a lot of respect for her saying, no, let me speak. This is what I have to say. And I will go back and I will listen to it again. I'm a little confused by what I may have missed, but I'm glad you brought that up, and I'll take a look.
Yeah, and this also should be put in the context of being interviewed with a hostile interviewer. It's not an easy task. On the other hand, it is her full-time job. So and then on the other hand, what she said is Israel's policy. I'm not sure she would follow this policy if she was running the country. Morgan.
I think maybe the bit you're picking up on was a bit that I noticed as well, which was when Mark Austin brings up the aspect of targeting civilians. One of the things that he says is that he's criticizing Israel for taking actions knowing that civilians are going to die. And what's I thought was suggestive about that is that typically the side which is criticizing Israel is saying that Israel's at fault for not following the provisions of international law. However, under the provisions of international law, you're allowed to take strikes if that will kill civilians, if there are military targets there. So actually, that's completely null and void point, unless you're really saying that even you don't support international law because you shouldn't take any military action anyway. So actually, his whole perspective on this was confused, and what I thought was she should have picked up on that. Now maybe it's tricky in the moment to do that, but she should have, if she were putting her case across, it's slightly better, and maybe she'd do this in hindsight, is she should say we're allowed to do that, even though she might not accept that standard. We should, by the other side standard, we're allowed to do that. So yeah, I noticed that as well. I thought it was a shame.
Yeah, and that's another thing, she is speaking once again. She's speaking for the Israeli government. So she might necessarily have to say things that she doesn't agree with. But this point came up in the context of, he was saying, Israel is losing international support, and she said, no, we have America, something to that effect. Why not say, so what? What is international support? Whose support are we losing? We're losing what? Support of countries who would never have supported us. Look at the list of the countries in the UN. It's very nice to say, look at this many countries voted against Israel, and only 10 countries voted with Israel, or 9 including Israel, 10 including Israel. Look at the list. Look at the countries. Are these countries that you see as some sort of moral leaders, the people you need to listen to, the people if North Korea says this policy is immoral, are you then thinking, okay, we should reconsider? Because again, that is the North Korean side of this war. North Korea has also condemned Israel on this, just like the left in every Western country and the media apparently. James.
Razi, has anybody on the in the Israeli government officially responded to her interview? I'm just curious.
Not that I've seen. It has been mentioned, but you know what? Let me look into that. James, do you want to go ahead? And I'm gonna see if go through Israeli media quickly and see what they said about it.
Yeah, when they say we have America international support, that is already suggesting that they need any other country to give them the moral sanction to survive and do what is required for self-defense. Alas, they really don't. America doesn't really have Israel's back. Yes, they vetoed the resolution that called for an immediate ceasefire in the Security Council. But what they're talking about right now, and what the sort of demands they have to, Israel, what is the US government saying? Israel has to show more concern for civilian deaths. So as Morgan says, I mean, this is this extraordinary situation in which this is the first time in the history of warfare in which the defender has to be more concerned about civilian deaths. It's insane. So you start an aggressive war. Wars will cause civilian deaths. As such, always. And they're always the fault of the aggressor. And so if we're saying, no, well, Israel, the one acting in self-defense, they have to show, quote, more concern for civilian deaths. That's insane. That's like that is in effect saying you do not have a right to defend yourself. You do have to suck it up. You do have to suffer more October 7th. That's what they're saying. Translate when an American diplomat says that. Translate they should do more to protect civilian lives into they need to suffer more October 7th. Israel needs to suck it up, turn the other cheek, and just submit to more October 7th, because in effect that's what they're saying.
Yeah, and a point that was made there by the interviewer was also that Biden said that Israel needs to stop indiscriminate bombings, which was also a major...
I have never seen more discriminate surgical bombing in the history of warfare. I have never seen a more delicate approach in warfare, I think, in the history of warfare. Now, recently, America has been sort of fighting semi-wars, but surely this has got to, given the skill of the IDF, but the demands that America is placing, in effect, now on Israel are causing IDF deaths. America is in effect saying more Israeli heroes have to die so that fewer Hamas-caused Gazan deaths occur. I mean, the causality here, the anti-conceptual mentality that is refusing to identify what's what here is sort of unique in the history of warfare. It really is. I know it's something that's happened recently in warfare. Big bad America has to be concerned about, collateral damage in a way it never had to before. But it applies even more now apparently to Israel after October 7th. No, ladies and gentlemen, war is war. This is ugly. They're the aggressors. Civilians are going to die. And what the media and the pundits should all be saying is it's Hamas's fault, 100%. Oh, no, Hezbollah and the Houthis in Yemen's fault, too. But it's the bad guy's fault. Every Palestinian death. And that has to be repeated again and again and again. And it has to come from policymakers. So, yeah, it's like I say, the white flag in my sense has already been hoisted.
So, Linda, I didn't find any response from Israel. I found a response from the British Prime Minister saying this is our policy. I found it translated into Hebrew and then translating into English, but something like we remain firm in our position that the two-state solution is the right thing. There's also, while I was looking, I found I wasn't really following the story, but apparently she was she had people protesting outside her home, and she wasn't leaving home, and her, she has daughters, and so yeah, this is all in that context. But yeah, any thoughts on that?
I'm just worried that maybe I was distracted by how bad the interviewer was. So, like I said, I'm going to go back and watch it again.
Yeah, but also he's bad, but in the context of like generally how Israelis are interviewed on British media, that was relatively not as bad as some of the rest. So yeah, and I do think this is how Israelis should expect to be interviewed when they're on British television, unfortunately. And in a few minutes we'll see how somebody from the pro-terrorist side should expect to be interviewed. So Morgan, Frank had a question for you. Did you get to see it? It's in the chat. It's
let's have a look.
Sorry, go on. The charges that October 7th was a hoax and Israel is committing war crimes is being perpetrated by an insane radio show called Gray Zone, coming out of Pacifica and WBAI.
Okay, and what's he asking about it?
That's all I found. That's all he said. So
the claims that October 7th is a hoax is coming from this one particular radio show. Okay, fair enough. I've not heard of that before. That's interesting. Is this a left-wing organization, or who are these guys? I have no idea.
I have no idea either. I mean, this is a thing that comes out whenever something happens.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's also, unfortunately, I've been reading a couple of books about anti-Semitism in the UK recently, and it goes through a bit of the history of anti-Semitic tropes. The idea that the Jews are people scheming to try and deceive people and all this kind of stuff has a bit of an unfortunate history, and the claims that October 7th was a hoax rather plays into some of those ideas, I have to say. So yeah, there's a bit of an unfortunate tenor to all of those conspiracy theories as well. So that they're not just bad because they're conspiracy theories; they also have anti-Semitic connotations as well, I think. So,
yeah, and of course, what's unique in this case is, unlike people who said deny the Holocaust or any other historical fact, is that so much of this was live streamed by the savages themselves on Facebook. It was recorded. They were proud of it. They displayed it, and the idea that this was a hoax, by the way, is not just a claim about the Jews, but it's also a claim about any idea that such savage societies actually exist. And of course, we know they do exist. They're all over the Middle East except Israel. Conspiracy theorists, have to do a lot of work to actually deny everything that they know for a fact, and then make stuff up, to fill in the blanks, even when there are no blanks.
Sorry, go on, James.
Well, it's just an extraordinary thing. The Hamas leader admitted that they attacked on October 7th. I mean, you get to the point where your denial of, you'll do whatever it takes to deny the facts, even ignore statements from Hamas and Iran, which to a large extent acknowledge that they were aggressors in an attack on October 7th. And so you're ignoring not only the video that they took themselves, statements they make afterwards themselves, but you're ignoring, the tons of physical forensic evidence that now exists. Horrific. As a former criminal investigator and prosecutor, I can tell you, looking at some of those reports will give you nightmares for days. And it is physical proof, ladies and gentlemen, that international observers have seen. Think of the mental pretzels you're going into just to be anti-Israel.
I agree with James. The number of people in the world with their heads in the sand over this, and then making claims or just running their mouths about something that they don't understand. They don't even know where the countries are. Right. It's pathetic.
Yeah, as we saw in that From the Mountains to the Sea a few weeks ago. Thank you, Jeff. Jeff Bannister has been a YouTube member for 19 months. That's pretty much from the start, right? I think there have been 19 months of membership, or not, definitely not a lot more. He says, happy holidays to ARCUK. Have a great Christmas party. Let's hope we don't have to spend so much time on this war next year. I'm also hoping, I'm not optimistic about that, but let's see. And there will be content that is not just war related, but I think certainly for the time being, it will be very much mostly war related. And of course, as mentioned, I think I mentioned it in the previous show, coming up in 35 minutes, we do have our first show since the war started that isn't about the war. It is about the new president, newly elected president of Argentina, Javier Milei. We have that is on Finance Friday with Jim Brown, and he has two very big guests, Maria Marty of Ayn Rand Center Latin America, and Eduardo Marty, the famous economist. So stay tuned for that. And we also have Equal to Reality has also been a member for 19 months. And he says, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and Happy Holidays to you all. I hope you have a great party tomorrow. Thank you. I think Equal to Reality, if I'm not mistaken, you are in Leeds. Hopefully that's nobody's going to come after you once I said that. But yeah, that's close enough. You can still make it to the Christmas party. It is a member's Christmas party, but you are a member. So hopefully you can join us. It's going to be worth the trip from Leeds. Although I think a trip from Leeds to London is always worth the trip, but this will be especially worth it. Morgan, so Daniel sent me some stuff that I am just reading now. He says The Gray Zone is an American fringe far-left blog founded and edited by American journalist Max Blumenthal. And then, do you know Max Blumenthal, or do you want me to read the little one-paragraph bio?
I go for. Unfortunately, I feel terribly uninformed now.
Oh,
So
you're missing out big time. Max Blumenthal is an American author and blogger. He was a writer for The Nation, Alternet, The Daily Beast, Al Akbar, and Media Matters for America, and has contributed to Al Jazeera English, the New York Times, and the Los Angeles Times. He has been a writing fellow for the Nation Institute. He's a regular contributor to Russian state-owned Sputnik and RT. Sounds already from one paragraph like a lovely guy. Morgan, your thoughts?
Obviously, the most credible source out there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that litany of institutions he's been a part of, I think, tells you a lot. The Nation, although they had the distinct honor of employing Christopher Hitchens at one time, is very, very lefty. And Al Jazeera, if anyone has never read Al Jazeera, I suggest you go do it. They're a very disgraceful Qatari state-owned news broadcasting service. So I get a bad impression from that. So, but although I've never heard of these guys before, or Max Blumenthal, I have to say the idea that October 7th is a hoax is basically one that kind of strong left institutions in the UK have been not quite saying quite as strongly as that, but have basically been alleging for the last few months. We've spoken about Owen Jones on the channel a few times, and his stuff basically amounts to casting on aspersions onto to whether it's actually happened. So does Navarro Media, who are, basically just declare themselves to be communists. That's how far left they are, and they very much follow that same line. So it doesn't surprise me that someone who's writing for these places as well would advocate for that kind of thing. So, we'll have a look into that. Maybe there's something story-worthy there for the channel, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, maybe. I was actually had a personal goal of not mentioning Owen Jones during both shows today. But since you mentioned him, I don't think it counts as me mentioning him. But yeah, we will be talking about. I think the modern day Holocaust deniers are people we should really talk about a lot, because it's very unique. This specific type of denying things that you have seen on video, and specifically, because of or possibly because of the attacks are on Jews and by Palestinians.
Think of the mentality that would imagine that Israel would stage either a real or fake attack of this sort. Imagine the mentality that would imagine that there was a real attack that Israel would do to set this up. Imagine the hatred, the prejudice against Jews that you must have. You must be dripping with hatred. You must think Jews are inhuman, willing to kill their own children in order to create an excuse to go do what? A quote, genocide on Gaza, which of course Israel is doing nothing like doing. It's the most perverse use of a term that in this context is an anti-concept. You can imagine this is dripping anti-Semitism. Anything like that says that, you must regard them as Jews, as such, as a whole, as deceptive, lying, willing to kill their own children. In other words, the reality about Hamas that was taught to the world on October 7th, you must think that about Jews times 10. Much worse. They'll do it to their own children just so they can have an excuse to kill children in Gaza. Wow. Consider that mental state. These people hate Jews as such. I can think of no other motivation that could actually allow someone to believe that October 7th was a setup. It's not Hamas that did these things. Much worse, the Israelis did this to themselves just so they could go kill Palestinians. Wow.
Yeah, and Linda, there's something unique that I found about, just Holocaust denial in general, but the modern day version of it post October 7th, which is people being deniers and supporters of something at the same time. Like you don't see people who are not on the side of the terrorists denying that the terrorists did what they did. Sorry, I think I may have messed that up. The people who are denying it are also people who support it. So yeah, any thoughts on that? Any explanation of kind of the way these people think to come to get to the point of the conclusion of you know what, this never happened, but I support the people who were accused of doing this but didn't.
Well, for anybody to have that kind of mental, and I don't even have a word for that right now, that they can think that way. It's, in one regard, I think it's very infantile. You think of a baby who closes their eyes, and if they close their eyes, supposedly you've disappeared, you don't exist anymore, and then peekaboo, there you are. People who are this deranged, they're not rational, obviously. They're not living in reality. They are living in a world that they've created for themselves. I mean, to deny that the Holocaust happened is probably one of the most barbaric mental images, and I don't understand how someone can feel that way and potentially believe it. I mean, to me, that's almost unbelievable that they're in such a state of denial that they think that's real. And that's an illness. That's a mental illness if I've ever heard one. These things happened, these things are happening, and they need to be dealt with, not denied.
Yeah, you say they're living in a world that they created for themselves. The problem is they want to create that world for the rest of us. So yeah, we very much need to unfortunately pay attention to these people. And James, I see you have something to say before we move on to the next topic.
This Holocaust denial and minimization thing has been going on for decades really. And you hear some of the things. I mean, there's a fellow New Testament scholar who's written a book that many people compare to mine, Caesar's Messiah, this guy Joe Atwell. He honestly believes, I will never have friendly communications with him ever again after learning the monstrous things that he believes. He believes, for example, that a group of people behind the scenes sort of engineered the Holocaust and Zionism simultaneously. That Hitler was just sort of the effect of this international conspiracy to create Israel, mind you, by killing 6 million or more Jews in the Holocaust. That's the madness that these people can actually believe. And I can only think that it stems from, as I say, deep hatred of the Jewish people, of a profound anti-Semitism. That's all I can think.
And I don't think that you can hate at that level without something being very wrong with you.
Yeah, there's something really twisted.
There's something really wrong. Something is misfiring somewhere.
speaking of something very wrong, I know James and Linda, you didn't get a chance to watch this, so you will watch it live with us. I basically, when I saw this, I had some things to say about it, and I thought they're longer than a tweet. So yeah, if anybody doesn't actually have anything to say, I think you all will. But if you don't, let me know. Daniel, can you play the beginning? I think at the beginning we will it'll probably be a longer chunk of it because we didn't have time to go through and pick the parts that I wanted to discuss. But yeah, go ahead and I'll tell you when to pause.
Thank you so much for that, and let's pick up on that exact issue and talk to Dr. Nathaniel George, who is a lecturer in politics of the Middle East at SOAS University. Very good to have you with us. We know that it's unlikely that Israel will commit to a timetable to the end of this war, despite the fact that Jake Sullivan might push them on that. But what we hear from Israeli officials time and time again is that this will all end if Hamas surrenders and gives up the hostages and releases them. What does Hamas say?
Thank you for having me on your program. Well, Hamas has been clear from the beginning that what it seeks is a negotiated exchange of Palestinian captives for the Israeli captives that it has. So that is the position of Hamas. And so far, after 69 days of Israeli military activity and industry.
Right. So this wasn't the main point, but first of all, you can see right off the bat this guy is a de facto spokesperson for Hamas. He doesn't say that. He actually later on says, "I'm not a spokesperson for Hamas." When since he has played one on TV until a certain point in the interview, the interviewer asks him a question which he feels uncomfortable with. This guy deteriorates. We're not going to watch the whole interview, but you'll see how he starts off low and he surprisingly goes lower. So yeah, he starts with Hamas from the start, has made it clear that their goal is a negotiated. So, well, Hamas, the start was Hamas slaughtering Jews in the most savage ways imaginable, raping, burning people alive, beheading babies. They were cutting body parts off of women while raping them. These are the people that this person is speaking for. So it's good that he gives us this context right from the start. James, you had something to say here.
Well, it's just a lie. I mean, we heard from the Hamas leader there will be more October 7th and more October 7th and more October 7th. There was no such position stated early on. The Hamas has been consistent from the beginning. We want Palestinian prisoners back. No, they never said such a thing. It became such a thing when Americans and international, there were all kinds of foreign nationals who were also taken hostage. So there was all kinds of international pressure to do something about the hostages. They could have released the hostages day one. They didn't have to take women and children hostages in the first place, and nor was that their goal. But the point is that what they're getting are terrorists and killers released for grandmothers and 5-year-old girls. It's absolutely disgusting. Forgive me, but I can't hear lies like that without.
Yeah, I mean, Hamas, it's true that Hamas wanted a ceasefire as soon as they had done the killing. They killed as many Jews as they could. They took as many captives. Again, like you said, ideally for them, they would kill all the Jews, but they took Israeli hostages because they know that this is a way to get more terrorists out, to make the next attack more successful, and to defend themselves from what may have been more serious bombings. Linda.
Sorry, I couldn't find the unmute. This was so calculated. Everything about this was calculated right down to the lies. And that just boils my blood.
Yeah, and it's important, like parents who are watching, if you are, if you have a child who you're hoping will one day go to university, watch the people who are going to be, the child's teachers. The 18-year-olds go to this university right here in central London. It's like I think 10-15 minute ride from where I am, and this is the person who's gonna, the kind of thinking that brought him to these conclusions. I guarantee you he's not rational on everything else and then just an animal when it comes to this. Morgan.
I've nothing more to add based on what you guys have said, but just so the university he teaches at is the School of Oriental and Asian and African Studies, which is a very left-wing university by UK standards. So just put that into perspective. And so this is the kind of thing that you should expect to see from them. So whilst at the same time, whilst this is kind of outrageous comments, in an unfortunate sense, this is also part of the course. So yeah, it's very disappointing.
Yeah, and certainly at SOAS. Certainly do not send your kids to SOAS. Daniel, let's continue.
So, military activity and indiscriminate bombing of civilian targets, mostly, they've been unable to achieve the control of the Gaza Strip that would be necessary for defeating Hamas.
And what is the latest that we've been hearing from Ismail Haniyeh, one of the chiefs of Hamas? Because I have heard reports that he is open to negotiations to end the war with Israel, but that it had to include any post-war plan. It had to involve Hamas.
Well, Hamas has been clear from the day one that they're open to a negotiated end of the war and exchange of captives. Now, the latest statement of Haniyeh, I haven't heard exactly, but this has been the position of Hamas. And in fact, the Hamas position in the 2017 charter and reiterated in the past decade many times is that they would be willing to accept a Palestinian state on the 1967 borders that have had full sovereignty. Now, contrary to popular belief, it's Israel who has never been serious about achieving this kind of a two-state solution, and is opposed to the creation of a sovereign Palestinian state in control of its borders, security, and its foreign and domestic policy.
But Dr. George, when Hamas says they...
Yeah. So first of all, there's so much there that actually we could have done a whole episode just on that segment. I think
the lies per second. I think he broke a record in telling the rate lies per second that came out of that man's mouth was astonishing to me.
But before we get to what he said, I mean, the interview question. Here we have a panel where we're all friends and we're all on the same side. And I think that when I present a question to you guys, it's similar to the way she presented the question to him. It's basically she's saying here's Hamas being the good guys. What say you? That's the essence of that question. Am I wrong? Did anybody?
The question was dishonest. The question is distorting. The question is insane. And then, of course, that sets him up. That wasn't just a softball question. That was a slow softball with a, massive warning, and I'll give you 3 shots at it. No, this is insane. The question is already showing you the moral depravity of the BBC. And I'm going to say that and put it in italics. The moral depravity of the BBC is made obvious just by the question and the questioning. And then continuing on with this guy's outrageous lies. Of course, his statements are so disconnected from reality to allow him I trust that no responsible TV journalist in the United States would allow someone to lie and lie and lie like that, provably and demonstrably again and again and again, as if the statement from the Hamas leader of October 7th did not happen. No, he wants the total eradication. There will be October 7th until there's no more Israel. That's Hamas's official position. Hamas has never been willing to engage in peace, and people who would do October 7th do not want peace. The outrageousness of the lies that came out of this guy's mouth, and then the journalist, the total journalistic irresponsibility. She is as dishonest as the person she's interviewing here because she's not challenging him at all on what are demonstrable lies. Unbelievable.
Yeah, so, Linda, he says at some point that Hamas wants a two-state solution, which is, of course, a complete lie. Now, I don't know if this is something that somebody somehow associated with Hamas tweeted somewhere and he just follows up on that, or he just made it up completely of his own volition. It certainly is not Hamas's policy. Hamas's stated policy, and it has been stated since Hamas was created and from after October 7th, is killing the Jews in Israel and taking over the country. Linda, the question was for you, but James has to say something, and then we'll come to you.
He said that this has always been Hamas's official policy. He didn't just say this is Hamas's policy. He went for the full lasagna there, and with the total lie. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And I don't know if we'll probably not get to the whole interview. I don't know if we'll get to a bit more where you see him being a bit less uncomfortable with himself. She doesn't challenge him, but he's still it's got to be difficult to live like that, Linda.
Well, I think the whole interview is bullshit. I think that the sensationalized journalism by the BBC combined with what to me sounded like very rehearsed, memorized answers that he had come up with, it just is one big rat's nest of lies. And I think they both had their purpose. Unfortunately, here we are sitting here talking about it, which is, one of the biggest reasons for sensationalized journalism, because we're sitting here talking about BBC. And even though he was lying, the more reason for us to talk about it. But how is the rest of the world viewing that? I mean, you got 4 rational individuals who understand what's happening versus a whole lot of other people who have no clue and can get sucked in by just about anything anyone says that they think might be plausible. And the only thing plausible here is that they were both lying.
Exactly. How many people tomorrow? Tomorrow's Saturday. Saturday is the day that savages block the streets of London to show their support for terrorism and for killing Jews. How many people are going to show up there saying, I heard about these protests. I didn't come to them before, but then I saw this interview and this guy, I didn't know this, but he informed me that Hamas wants a 2-state solution and Israel does not. Because by the way, those people will be closer to knowledgeable on anything than I think most people in these protests. I don't think people actually do their research for their sake. I hope they don't before they go to these protests, because if they do, they actually support this. Morgan.
Well, of course, one of the notable things he said right towards the end there is that Israel is not serious about a 2-state solution and never has been, I think was how he put it, which goes to your point. And anyone who even gave a cursory glance at the history of Israel and Gaza would know that that's just not true. Gaza would not exist right now if Israel had not given consent for it to exist, had not withdrawn, had not facilitated the elections along with the EU. So that is really ridiculous. And is often pointed out, if Hamas put down their weapons tomorrow, there would be a Palestinian state. And if Israel did, then Israel would be wiped off the map. And no one disputes that. No one has actually ever said, oh, well, that's not true. So him saying that, I have to think, I have no idea what's going through his mind when he's saying that, but it's completely ridiculous that Israel's never been serious about a Palestinian state. The fact that the Israeli ambassador, going back to the other clip, is now saying since October 7th, there's not a chance for it. It's just people waking up to the violent reality of Hamas. It doesn't reflect anything to do with the history. So those are my thoughts.
I think there's a lot of backpedaling that's happening here with people who are coming into this, because to make those kinds of statements after October 7th and what happened, if Hamas, let's just, sake of his lies, Hamas wants a 2-state solution. No, they don't. They wouldn't have done what they did. You don't go in and rape and pillage and do all of the horrible things that they did. These people are looking for attention, and it's the most horrific kind of attention that I can't even completely wrap my head around what must be going through these people's minds. How do they sleep at night? Dealing with vile, malevolent people is toxic. It's draining, and this is what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
By the way, the Oslo Accords, which were signed in September of '93 between Israel and the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, which is the organization where when you see this flag that is called the Palestinian flag, that is the flag of the PLO. So that was a step in a direction which supposedly was going to hopefully lead to a 2-state solution. And the PLO, as part of it, accepted the state of Israel and recognized that when we saw
for eventually accepting it. is all they really accept, is all they really agreed to. And Israel should never have agreed to the, but in any event, Israel there showed they were willing for peace. Israel made peace with Egypt. Israel made peace with Jordan. Israel has given the Sinai back. Israel gave them Gaza. Israel was attacked in the late 40s the minute they came into existence. 20 years later, they were attacked again. Then they were attacked again in the early 70s. And then 20 years after that, they were attacked again. The amount of evasion that that is expressed here, as I say, the number of lies per second, per nanosecond, may have just set a record from the nonsense that I just heard here. Unbelievable.
Yeah. And my point about Oslo was that the PLO, when you see the aftermath of the Oslo Accords being signed, it's clear that the PLO used this as a tactic to get closer. It was very difficult to run a terrorist campaign against Israel from Tunisia. It was much easier to do so from the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, which is what they did. So even the Palestinians who did sign an agreement with Israel, the goal of that agreement was to make it easier for them to kill Jews, and it succeeded in that sense. And of course, Hamas is not yet at the point where they're going to say that, but who knows? Maybe the next October 7th, the day after, they'll say we're ready to negotiate now. And of course, the world would say Israel is evil because they refuse.
Exactly. And I wonder what this Hamas spokesman, because that's all he really was, this Hamas spokesman who was being interviewed on the BBC, what he thinks the distinction between the Palestinian Authority and Hamas is. If Hamas has always wanted a peaceful two-state solution with Israel, why do they oppose Fatah? Why do they oppose the Palestinian Authority? Why are there any divisions among them at all? If they're all on the same page about agreeing to Israel's existence, these people know they're lying. The BBC knew it was a lie as they're doing it, and the man uttering the noise coming out of his mouth knew he was lying. Evasion on such a massive scale in order to justify the continued existence of Hamas and pull Israel back from defending itself is outrageous. It's dishonest. That's all I can see is overt dishonesty and evasion.
So we have a brief the objective in about 4 minutes. I do want to quickly read out. So Bonnie says, weren't the Arab states getting closer to agreement just before October 7th? I mean, there was the negotiation with Saudi Arabia. I've said in the past I wouldn't sign any of those agreements with any Arab country until they protect the rights of their citizens rather than violate them. But yeah, right after October 7th, Saudi Arabia said it's not going to happen.
That's what this is all about.
That tells you what kind of peace this would have been.
Yeah, no. That's what this is all about. This has nothing to do with Palestinian resistance to Israeli occupation or Israeli oppression. That is absolute nonsense. This was coordinated from Iran precisely to scuttle the peace deal. I agree with you. I don't think there should, and certainly not on the terms they were going to do it. But the point is, whatever you think of a peace deal between the Saudis and Israel, it was designed to scuttle peace. That's what their goal was. And it was coordinated from Tehran. And if you think this has anything to do with the evil occupation of Gaza by Israel, you are, again, evading major facts. Facts these people know. Well, no. They know all the facts that we've just covered here. This is a giant evasion and a giant moral sanction for evil. It seems apparent to me.
So Barry says in the chat, the London team better be sure their tax dollars don't pay for the BBC. Oh, well, it's tax pounds, and of course they do. Do you think this is an organization that's voluntarily funded? Although people do give their money to weird causes, but yeah, the BBC is paid for by our tax pounds or dollars, as is the aid to Hamas, the Palestinians, and many bad things, which is why, I've
been a regular viewer of BBC America, a channel in the States that BBC runs, because I love British television. I can't watch it anymore. Just can't watch it. Cannot watch BBC America.
These journalist companies are making their money click by click by click, right? So the more views they get, the more sponsorships from evil companies they can. I mean, whatever it's all for money. I mean, it's an evil way to go about getting money.
Yeah, and I was, I don't want to give them more clicks, but I was, I wasn't thinking we would go through the whole interview, but the whole interview is on this guy's Twitter. So if you want to, Daniel, if you can put that in the chat or in the description, then people can watch that. Morgan, any additional thoughts right before we sign off?
I don't fund the BBC in that you have to buy a license fee if you want to own a television in the UK. And so I don't. Maybe my landlord does because we have a television here, so who knows? But yeah, so I think there is a degree to which the BBC journalists are morally culpable, especially the softballing of the interview with this guy and allowing him to say some of these things, which were just so ridiculous. However, at the same time, what I'm often struck in viewing these kind of things from journalists is I think the conventional perspective on the war is one which is hopelessly confused, and essentially, I think probably for moral reasons, of being able to identify who is the victim and who is the aggressor, essentially. And so, although there are some times where I think they could know better, and they should know better. And sometimes I think because of how hopelessly confused the conventional perspective that people kind of pick up from the culture around them is, there's a way in which they just couldn't be better without a fundamental, I think, probably better philosophical education. So at the same time, I think that they're almost just in the same way that you would not hold a child accountable for their actions. These are people who are almost on that same level. Sometimes that's what I think. Maybe that's wrong, but that's what I sometimes.
I definitely want them held accountable for their actions. We will keep doing that to whatever extent we can. Not tomorrow because we have the Christmas party, but we're back on Sunday. The Briefly Objective is starting right about now. Robert Nasser on journalistic disintegrity. Right after that, come back to this main channel in 5 minutes to watch Finance Friday with Jim Brown, Maria Marti, Eduardo Marti on Javier Milei. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you soon. Bye.